So I hope everyone's got something to eat there. You know, we're always grateful. I'm always grateful for the Women's Club. They've been doing the food, the Women's Club plus Bob, who does the coffee. He's an honorary Women's Club member, but so he does the coffee, I think. But I'm always grateful for the women. I see Rita back there and her two boys. She can't hear me. Rita, thank you for all the food, everybody. Bob. Speaking of women, there is there is our women's club, which meets the first Friday. Am I somebody? Second Friday? Is it the second Friday? Okay, so it's usually the first, second, or the first. It's one of the Fridays of the month. It does. The only qualification is that you got to be a woman. And they meet right here. So you guys just come, and you'll see it in the bulletin. They have food. It's a little sample. They got a really good food usually. All of their leftovers go over to the residents. So Father Babin and Father Martin and I, we get to enjoy whatever's left over. Same for tonight. So and by the way, feel free to get up and go back there and get some more. Whatever it is that they have tonight, it's always good. I'm convinced people come not for me, but for the food to these things. Make sure the RCIA people, those needing sacraments, those entering here, make sure you're signing in. And if you have your yes, Bob. Oh, the men. Okay, yeah, okay. The Women's Club. Men's Club is second Tuesday, which will be tomorrow night, actually, right, is the Men's Club. Even fewer qualifications to join the Men's Club. But they have more fun, I think. I do not allow them in here. So they meet outside under the hay barn. So boys, just go 7:30. Just go under the hay barn. You'll see all the guys there eating food. Yes, dear.
I just wanted to let you know, so when you see it on the paper, you know my situation. I taught you last week. So I've been signing on the sign-in. So just know when you look at that.
Just sign, yeah, just make sure you're signing in so I know you're here. And if you have your, if you haven't turned in your registration form, if you're one of the RCIA people, make sure I get that. You can just hand it right to me or give it to Rita outside there at the table. I will be in touch with you soon. Kind of once we kind of get the ball rolling and get all those forms in, I'll be doing that. And let's see, what else? There should be a handouts that everyone got. Hopefully they're in order this week. And there we go. So the topic tonight is creation and the dawn of man. And we started, we're building here. We're building a structure, if you will, of faith, right? And we started with the rational understanding of the existence of God, and then we move on from there to the nature of God as Trinity and how things we understand by God from reason, and those things that we understand of God from His revelation. And we will continue with that. And now we're building from the existence of God, who has now revealed Himself to us. What did God do? Well, He created, right? I'm going to talk about creation today. Extending from today into next week, the creation of man and woman, and the introduction then, sadly, of sin and evil and the need for redemption after that. So we'll take it from there, and then we're off. So let's begin with our prayer in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. O ineffable Creator, true source of light and wisdom, origin of all things, be pleased to cast a beam of your radiance upon the darkness of my mind. Take from me the double darkness of sin and ignorance in which I was born. Give me quickness of understanding, a retentive memory, the ability to grasp things correctly and fundamentally, and abundant grace of expression. Order the beginning, Direct the progress and perfect the achievement of my work, you who are true God and true man, and who live and reign forever and ever. Amen, right? He's the creator, the source, right, of light and wisdom, everything. Origin of all things, as we said, right? We talked about all of the things that God is, his infiniteness, right? His eternity, his perfection, his simplicity, his omniscience, his omnipresence, his omnipotence, all of those good things. And what does he do? He creates. And we'll see what he creates, how he creates, and why he creates tonight. So all cultures throughout history have asked themselves questions about the origin of things, right? I mean, these are just common to all cultures and times. I mean, it's part of the nature of man. It's part of the unique properties of man to be able to say, who am I? Right? Where did I come from? I mean, I don't mean from my parents. I mean, where did my consciousness, my being, where did I come from? Where am I going? All of those questions, right? Where did the world come from? How was it created? Where's it going? How will it end? Where did man come from? Why is he different from the other animals? What's my destiny? What do I do? Am I just going to die one day and is that it? What do I do? We all are longing to know. It's part of our nature, as Aristotle said. All men by nature desire to know, to seek for these questions. And I said, using reason alone, we can begin to answer some of these questions, but as we'll see, that reason is augmented in a spectacular way, in just such an amazing way by God's revelation, what he tells us, what he reveals to us. It's from the Psalm. The existence of creation testifies to the existence and power of God, right? Psalm 19. The heavens proclaim the glory of God. The firmament declares his handiwork. In other words, just the existence of the universe proclaims that there must be a creator, right? Especially if you go out where it's not too much light, where there's not too much light pollution, and you get out there and you can see the multitude of the stars. You ever been in a place like that out in the country maybe? Or you go up in the mountains. I was in the mountains, the Andes Mountains once. We climbed to the top there, and it's just so amazing just to see it in all of creation. And you say, this is testimony, this is evidence of God's existence, right? The heavens themselves proclaim his glory. The firmament, that's the sky, and to the ancient mind, declares his handiwork. This is he who created it, right? But why? Why did he create? So it's incorrect to imagine that God needed to create the universe. Why? Because he was lonely, or because he was bored, or to increase his glory, or because he otherwise suffered from some lack. We've talked about that, right? God in his perfection needs to do nothing. He needs nothing to increase his glory. He doesn't need to create. He doesn't need something to make himself more perfect or happier or more complete, right? The church, he says, God chose to create out of his goodness. It's the only explanation. In order to show forth and communicate his glory to his creatures that he would form. The universe was created because of love and for love, the love of the Trinity, right? That's a great quote. This is from the First Vatican Council. This took place in the 1860s, 70s, somewhere in there. And in their one of their documents that they came up with, they said this. This is a great quote. This one true God, of his own goodness and almighty power, not for increasing his own beatitude, his own blessedness, right? His own holiness. Not for attaining his perfection. He's already perfect. But in order to manifest this perfection through the benefits which he bestows on creatures, with absolute freedom of counsel. He wasn't forced, right? With total absolute freedom of counsel. And from the beginning of time made out of nothing both orders of creatures, the spiritual and the corporeal. We're in a lot of little things going on, but what a great summary of how God created and why. We're going to unpack this one a little bit. But it acknowledges the that God, the one God, is the creator, right? Creation did not, he created it out of nothing. He created it not for any reason other than his own goodness, his love, and his desire to communicate himself to his creatures and fill them with his blessings. And he did so with absolute freedom, and made both orders of creatures, the spiritual and the corporeal. We'll talk about both of those orders tonight. All right. Here's a little concept called creation ex nihilo. So as people, if you see me talk, every now and then I'll throw in a little Latin lingo, right, just to make myself feel superior, right? Maybe some Greek, maybe some Hebrew, right, just to say, all right, see, I know more than you, right? But now this is like the big thing, right? The creation ex nihilo. That's just kind of one of the little churchy terms that we use. What does this mean? God created the universe ex nihilo, which means that he created all things out of nothing, with no prior material to work with. A lot of creation narratives from mythology, say Greek mythology and such, would say, well, there was some pre-existent stuff, and because of a battle amongst the gods, something happened and the world was created. All right, no. The Judeo-Christian tradition says God created all things out of nothing, right? There was no pre-existent prior material stuff to work with, right? In the strict theological sense, only God is able to create anything, right? Man can manipulate and rearrange already existing matter, but only God can cause it to come into being. Think of a sculptor taking a block of marble and turning it into a sculpture, right? Okay, did he create the sculpture? Yeah, I guess, but in a sense, no. I mean, the rock was already there. He did not create the stone, right? He, as Michelangelo would say, he just took away the parts that didn't belong, right? And left the form underneath. So in that strict sense, the sculptor does not create anything. He just uses already existing matter and rearranges it, reforms it in a beautiful way. But only God can cause something to come into being. As the great Saint Theophilus said in 175 AD, if God had drawn the world from pre-existent matter, what would have been so extraordinary in that? A human artisan makes from a given material whatever he wants, while God shows his power by starting from nothing to make all he wants. This is one of the church fathers, by the way, and you'll see throughout the course, I make a lot of references to the early church fathers, and I do that for a couple of reasons. Primarily among them is to show that a lot of our faith, in particular the Catholic faith, we're not just making this stuff up, right? As we're going to talk about a little later. This isn't stuff that I'm thinking up and talking to you about. This isn't, my theology. It's not, what I think is the thing. We're taking it from the beginning, right? All the way back. What the church fathers and the great theologians and the spiritual masters and the great academics and the great mystics and all of them had said down through the centuries, essentially saying the same thing, right? Just in a different way every time. And we see that continuity of faith all the way back to the beginning. And so that's one of the reasons I use the church fathers, those early guys in the early centuries, just to show we still teach and believe the same thing. So only God can create out of nothing. The closest man comes to creating is procreating, right? Which we'll talk about later in the course in the sacrament of matrimony. Right? Creation is a Trinitarian work. The New Testament tells us that Christ, the Son, right, of God, was present at creation, as was the Spirit, who was hovering over the waters there in Genesis chapter 1. And indeed, Christ was the agent through whom God created. So it was a Trinitarian work. All three of the divine persons act in unison. From the letter, this is from the prologue of the Gospel of John. He, meaning Jesus, the Son, was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. As we say every Sunday in the Nicene Creed, talking about Jesus, the Son, through him all things were made. Jesus was there at the beginning, right? As we said to the Pharisees, before Moses came to be, I am, right? I was there, right? All things were created through him and for him. Speaking of Christ, that's Paul's letter to the Colossians. So Christ was present. It was a Trinitarian act of creation. But more than that, God not only created the universe at a single point in the past, but continually sustains it at every moment. As Acts of the Apostles says, in him, in God, we live and move and have our being. He's continually present. It's by his continuous active will that the universe remains in creation. This is against the notion, we hit on this last week, made popular by the deists in the 18th century, that this idea that God created the universe but then let it go, kind of according to its own laws, and no longer has any involvement with it. This we called it the clockmaker hypothesis, where the universe is like a clock and God made it, wound it up, and then backed away and just doesn't care about it anymore. Or this idea of intelligent design. It was about 10 or 15 years ago. This was kind of popular. They didn't want to teach creation in schools, so they said, well, we'll teach intelligent design. The idea that there is a nameless deity that created everything by some intelligence, kind of like the Force, from Star Wars. But we don't know anything about it. We're not going to teach anything about it. But none of those things are Christian ideas, right? So we would reject the idea of intelligent design. Yeah, God is intelligent, but we would reject this idea that he is distant and just like a clockmaker made the universe and walked away. As we said last week, God is intimately involved in his creation, right? He knows every atom of everything that ever existed in every place and every time, right? Intimately involved in it. As we said, God is both transcendent. He stands above his creation as the creator, but he is also immanent. He's inside, he's intimately present to it. We hold both of those things together at the same time, right? Questions so far? Yeah. He sustains creation by his active will. From Job, if he should take back his spirit to himself and gather to himself his breath, all flesh would perish together, and man would return to dust. Right? One of the fundamental attitudes of the Christian faith is the goodness of creation. I cannot tell you how big this teaching is, right? And we're going to see this again and again throughout the course, right? The idea, again, we're going to hit this tonight. I mean, you can misuse creation. You can do evil things with it. You can put creation to an evil purpose, but creation itself is good, right? Fundamentally good, right? We're going to see this again and again. And why is that? Because God is supremely good, one of those fundamental aspects of God. Everything that he creates is good. And God, who is goodness itself, is not able to bring forth anything evil. Now, you remember I said God can do anything he wants? Well, the one thing he can't do is contradict himself, right? He cannot produce something evil, right? Everything that he produces is by its nature good. Thus, all things created by God are good insofar as they exist and are made by him, right? This is kind of against certain other religions and heretical Christian notions. Gnosticism from the 1st and 2nd century, Manichaeism from the 2nd, 3rd, 4th century, Platonism, Hinduism today claim that matter itself is evil, or it's a prison, or it's a distraction from the pure realm of the spirit, which is what's really good and real, and something that we have to escape, therefore, from the body. We have to escape from the world and to be to the realm of the spirits where everything is pure and good. And the church never said that. All of creation is good. It is fallen. It is distorted. It is tainted. But it remains fundamentally good. Even as we're going to see next week, even after the original, the sin of Adam and Eve, humankind created good, created in man's in God's image and likeness, damaged by sin, but remains fundamentally good. Right. So Christianity affirms the goodness of the world. A gigantic teaching we'll keep hitting on. So all of the, I should say all of it, but a great number of the creation narratives are found in the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible, particularly chapters 1 through 11, and in a particular way, chapters 1, 2, and 3. And a great deal is a great deal of that Genesis is foundational for the theological and anthropological and moral truths of our faith. Well, I mean by theological, how we understand God, anthropological, how we understand man, and the moral truths, what we should do or not do, right? Much of that is found right in the book of Genesis. It's kind of the theological, anthropological, moral foundation of what we believe. So the church does not take a purely fundamentalist approach to Genesis. We're not going to say, okay, the world is 6,000 years old because we can kind of date back the genealogy all the way back. No, as we'll talk about, we won't hold to a purely fundamentalist approach to Genesis. I will talk about the Catholic approach to scriptures in a future mini lesson. So what are the key points from Genesis that we pull out that will be foundational for our faith? First, as we talked about, that God alone is the creator of everything. He created everything from nothing, right? There was no existing stuff from which God created the universe. The act of creation was effortless for God. He didn't have to warm up, didn't have to, all right, let's stretch out, all right. And when Scripture talks about him resting on the seventh day, it wasn't because he was tired, right? It's just that he did not create anything that day. This is effortless for God, right? There is nothing that he cannot do. There is no power that he does not have. Creation of the entire universe for him was effortless, right? That's amazing to think about. There was no force opposing God. That was very clear from the Genesis narrative, and that was written in there to oppose those mythological notions that you see in some other ancient cultures, right? Creation was accomplished through Christ and for Christ, as we've seen in the book, the first Gospel of John, the prologue, first chapter of John, also some of the other writings of Paul. And that God's ultimate motivation was his goodness and his love. I'm going to make sure that the air is down here. It's a little warm. Let's see. Let's see, Rachel, you're back there. Would you turn those down to 72 there? Let's get a little air in here, shall we? I get all hot here talking about all this stuff. Get fired up, right? What are some other key points from the Genesis narratives, particularly Genesis 1 through 3? All of creation is judged by God to be very good, as we've said a couple of times now. We can't do evil with creation, but creation itself is still good. Practices, and you might be saying, well, wait, we engage in practices like prayer and fasting and almsgiving to detach ourselves from the created world. Is that because creation is evil, that we should detach ourselves from it? No, it's just the opposite. We do those practices not because things are evil, but because they're good. It's just not the highest good, right? This is a major challenge and a goal of the spiritual life, the detachment from that which is not God, to seek the Creator first, not creation. As Paul said, think of what is above, not of what is on earth. So we'll return to this later in the course when we talk about some of the practices, the devotional practices of the Catholic Church. But we maintain everything in creation remains fundamentally good.